I'm Jane Flint-Bridgewater, trustee of the Cardiovascular Care Partnership organisation, and one or other of our exec, I think, Richard Corder, will be co-chairing with me in a moment. Welcome to this very first session on women's heart health, the final frontier. And obviously we're trying to this afternoon highlight the lived experience of women heart patients and to identify the measures in place to address current inequalities and the steps we need to achieve true equality of care. Our first speaker, I'm delighted to welcome Rebecca Jarman, who is a research midwife with CRN South London based at Guy's and Thomas's. She has a particular interest in peripartum cardiomyopathy, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about, as I had to summarise in my youth and training medical students, and it was all very brief at that time. We have a long-standing experience of midwifery mortality and morbidity in pregnancy. So, Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you to the Cardiovascular Care Partnership for inviting me to speak today. So I'm speaking from the point of view of being a midwife and caring for pregnant women who develop heart disease in pregnancy. And also I have a bit of a personal background as well of heart disease. I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in 2015 myself, and since then I've developed an interest particularly in learning about cardiomyopathy, and that's where my interest particularly in peripartum cardiomyopathy has come about, combining my professional interest as a midwife and women in pregnancy with my personal diagnosis of cardiomyopathy as well. And peripartum cardiomyopathy is a specific type of cardiomyopathy that only occurs in relation to pregnancy. So my talk today is the invisibility of heart disease in and around pregnancy, and I don't have any conflicts of interest. So just to give you a bit of background to this, as Jane's already mentioned, this is an important topic because cardiac disease has been the leading cause of maternal death for the last 20 years. It always comes out in these Embrace reports, which are confidential inquiries into all the maternal deaths that take place in the UK. And so over the last 3-year period, the last report, there were 61 deaths from cardiovascular disease, and that's out of a total of 229, so over a quarter of those being from cardiovascular disease. And of those cases, only 10% were previously known to have heart disease before they became pregnant, which means that 90% of the maternal deaths are presenting, they're cases that are presenting for the first time or being picked up for the first time during or as a result of pregnancy. And for these reports, they cover the whole period of pregnancy and the year following the birth. So that's just a bit of background for you. So why do previously healthy young women die as a result of pregnancy? What is it about pregnancy that does that? Well, we know that pregnancy is a stress test for the heart. The heart the whole cardiovascular system undergoes many changes. There are lots of physiological changes that take place from the very early weeks of pregnancy, and these put a great strain on the heart. And it's as if the heart is on a treadmill for that 9 months. It's working so hard. And these effects can create a perfect storm situation where heart disease can be revealed for the first time or can occur for the first time in pregnancy. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem is that often these signs of heart disease are not actually being recognised as heart disease in pregnancy. And the reason for that is because the symptoms of heart failure are very common and similar to common symptoms that women experience through pregnancy. And we're going to look at those a little bit in a moment. And the other point is that women's voices are not being heard. So even though women are reporting these symptoms, it seems that as a health profession, we're not actually taking these women's concerns seriously and acting on their concerns in a timely manner. So the symptoms of heart disease, which I'm sure some of you will be aware of, are very similar to common symptoms that women get because of these physiological changes that take place during pregnancy. So women have a third extra circulating volume in their system, and also their cardiac output increases by 50% during pregnancy. And these changes occur from very early on and put the heart under strain. So yes, women can experience breathlessness. They can experience palpitations, be more aware of their heartbeats because they've got this extra volume of blood. They gain weight. Obviously, they gain weight. They're growing a baby. Normally, women would put weight on over a time frame. Normally, it's in the second half of pregnancy. Yes, they complain of swollen feet and ankles. They might get dizzy, and they probably feel fatigued, particularly towards the end of pregnancy. So how do we distinguish what's normal? How do we know when a woman tells us that she's feeling breathless, or she's very aware of her heartbeat, or she's got swollen ankles? How do we know if that is just pregnancy, or if she's actually showing signs of cardiac disease? Well, my message is that we need to listen to women. So as I said before, I've taken a particular interest in peripartum cardiomyopathy, and I ran a focus group of 12 women who had a diagnosis of peripartum cardiomyopathy, either during or following their pregnancy. And these were some of the things they said that they'd been feeling, some of the symptoms that they'd had, and how they'd been treated. So they knew something wasn't right. They knew it wasn't normal. Often they were presenting to health professionals several times, but their symptoms were being normalized. They were being told, well, you're pregnant, what do you expect? However, on delving a bit deeper, we see that these symptoms, they're not normal. Feeling like I can't breathe when I lie flat, exhausted from just sitting in a chair, unable to walk short distances. These are much more severe than we would expect in normal pregnancy. And so we're very good at looking for the pregnancy-related causes, things like preeclampsia. So if a woman's got swollen ankles, we might test her urine, and we might do some blood tests. But if those come back negative, very often that's the end of the line, so they aren't explored any further. Often women see a different midwife at every antenatal visit, so they lack continuity of care, so they haven't got the same person listening to their story that's being repeated time and again. It's the first time that midwife's heard their symptoms, and very often, sadly, they are even normalised by healthcare professionals. Very frequently, women are told they're just being anxious with palpitations. One woman was postnatally on the postnatal ward, and she said her heart rate was consistently very high, and she was discharged without further investigations, and she went on to develop peripartum cardiomyopathy. And one woman who had been admitted with an acute crisis with peripartum cardiomyopathy said, I felt lucky that the doctor who saw me had done a placement where they had experience of a case of peripartum cardiomyopathy and recognised it. Well, luck shouldn't really come into healthcare. So let's have a look at what the research tells us about this. So unsurprisingly, we know that women are underrepresented in cardiovascular trials, and pregnant women are generally by default excluded from research trials. However, when we look at research on women's experiences of cardiovascular disease, and this is in pregnancy and the first year following pregnancy, it describes women having lost faith in the healthcare symptoms because they've been dismissed by healthcare professionals, and this has caused them not only physical symptoms and disease, but also significant psychological impact as well. And that was from not actually being heard and listened to by healthcare professionals. And often this trauma from not actually being listened to properly and believed when they report their symptoms had a longer lasting effect on them psychologically than the impact of the actual cardiovascular disease that they had been diagnosed with. So women wanted to be heard because being heard would facilitate being assessed, diagnosed and treated with the degree of attention and urgency their conditions required. Women wanted to be told what their diagnosis was and have it explained to them, to be provided with what evidence there was, and where there was none, to have the rationale of recommended care explained. So why are women's voices not being heard, and what were the barriers? So as we've spoken already about, there is a tendency to normalize symptoms in pregnancy. I think we all want to think pregnancy is normal, that women are generally healthy having babies. However, sadly, this isn't always the case, and pregnancy can reveal previously unknown or undiagnosed heart conditions because of the extra strain on the heart during that time. So if women are told your symptoms are normal, particularly if they're a first-time mother, it's going to take a lot for them to then present again. And so their symptoms, they get worse, and the heart disease progresses because it's not been diagnosed and it's not being treated. And this is when they end up being admitted in severe heart failure. So these women that took part in this qualitative research, they were all fluent in English. They were able to make their case. They were able to explain very well. They were well educated and articulate, and yet they felt that they struggled to have their voices heard. So if these women struggled, how about others who are less fluent in English, who have greater inequalities, who face greater barriers, who have lower literacy and language levels? How are they going to manage if these women can't even get their message across? So my particular interest is in how we as midwives can improve the diagnosis of these newly presenting cases in pregnancy. And I think midwives are often the first person that a pregnant woman will report these symptoms to when they're pregnant. So we have a big responsibility to really listen to what women are telling us, and not just listen dismissively, but listen with a view to exploring how much impact these conditions, these symptoms are having on their daily lives. Because when we ask questions, that's when we'll discover the severity of them, and then we will realize that these symptoms are not normal. And we need to be aware that heart disease can occur for the first time in pregnancy or be revealed for the first time in pregnancy. And we, as midwives, we just need to recognize that and make sure they're referred to a specialist who can investigate and give them a diagnosis. So what for the future? Well, the good news is that we are recognising that the pregnant population is changing. Women are getting pregnant older. There's greater diversity and ethnicities in our country. And we need to adapt to meet those needs. And recently we have maternal medicine networks. So the whole of the UK is now covered by maternal medicine networks that are divided geographically. And these contain obstetric physicians, specialist midwives, obstetricians, a whole multidisciplinary team of people who can care for people with heart disease in pregnancy. So hopefully with an increasing awareness and recognition, these women will get treated sooner. We need greater collaboration between the multidisciplinary team to make sure the specialists are involved and they can all discuss from their own viewpoint what's the best plan for the woman for her pregnancy. And then really, with these women who are presenting for the first time, who are undiagnosed, we need to listen to what they're saying and hear them, and really try to understand the extent of how the symptoms are affecting their lives. So midwives have a real role to play here, not just in listening to women and hearing and acting on what they're saying, but also investigating and asking questions about the woman's family history, because maybe this is an inherited cardiac condition which they haven't previously known about and is being revealed by this stress of pregnancy. This is just a poster that I've created about the work that I've done to raise awareness of peripartum cardiomyopathy, because we know that timely diagnosis and treatment prevents progression of disease, and women are more likely to recover better if they're diagnosed and treated sooner. And also, these women, through their trauma of not being listened to, not being heard, and then having severe emergency admissions to hospital, are traumatized. They feel alone and isolated as they've just become new mothers. And there's previously been no supports for them in the UK. And through the charity Cardiomyopathy UK, I've set up a peer support group for these women. So it's online, it's virtual. We meet about every 6 weeks, and I host those sessions for women who can come along and just hear from others, to know that they're not alone and share their symptoms. And we've done a whole load of resources, and also I've done information for midwives to make them aware of this condition as well. And those webinars are on the Royal College of Midwives website, and they're freely available. You don't have to be a member to access those. So raising awareness is critical to getting a diagnosis as well. So I just wanted to close by going back to my original points and the Embrace report. And I wanted to leave you with this, which is a call that is often made in the Embrace reports to all healthcare professionals who deal with pregnant women, to be the person to hear and act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's splendid. While people are just thinking of a quick question to ask, may I ask you how far the patient literature for pregnancy actually alerts women to the standard, what any doctor should recognise are the inappropriate symptoms and signs. So inappropriate tachycardia, inappropriate breathlessness. How far does the normal pregnancy literature alert women to be suspicious?
I think that's a really good point that you've raised there. And I think there is discussion about, because women have so much information, they're given so much information about a whole range of topics when they're pregnant, they can be bombarded. And maybe we need to be, maybe we need to be specific about this information, who we give it to, when we give it to them, and how also we give it to them.
but bearing in mind your point that many of these women are occurring for the first time,
exactly.
in a way you've got to let everybody know.
So it's very difficult, isn't it? This is the thing. So it is a case of raising awareness, isn't it?
It is.
Raising awareness amongst healthcare professionals of these rare conditions.
Yes, we have one question there, and then we must probably move on.
Brilliant, thank you for that. It's Michaela Nuttall. I was just reflecting on a couple of points, and I was thinking, hello. So, first of all, I love the thought of the focus groups that you did and what came out of it. Would you ever consider repeating it for the women who didn't turn up to focus groups? So, not necessarily your fluent English-speaking, educated women, just to see what would come through there?
Well, definitely. I mean, definitely. The problem is accessing those women, really. So I got, the way I got my 12 women for the focus group was through the charity. So I put out a call through the charity for women to get in touch with me if they were happy to take part in the focus groups. And those were the women that responded. And I would like to do more research into this.
There's quite a move, I think, within midwifery at the moment around equity, diversity, and I know there's a big drive, particularly within midwives themselves, so I'll pick up with you afterwards and put you in contact with some of those. And secondly, I was thinking, when I was pregnant, I don't think I wanted to hear bad news. I don't think I wanted to worry about stuff what was going wrong, and I think it'll be an extra challenge to...
As a mother of having had a twin pregnancy, I would say we give an enormous amount of literature today from Twins Trust, because they're known and in Embrace has shown that the morbidity and mortality are higher with twin pregnancy. You've got to alert, you've got to define the normal, what you expect as normal, but also be aware of the things that go wrong. And mums actually can accept that. So people expecting multiple births can actually be prepared for that, I think. Thank you, Michaela. We are going to need to move on. I'm sure there are burning questions, but perhaps if we have any time, we'll do it at the end.